There are some conversations that we must make comfortable in every household and society as a whole. There are also moving stories of perseverance and purpose that not only uplift others, but inspire us all to think and reach higher in hopes of positively affecting someone else. Throughout my journey, I've been fortunate enough to have been a part of some amazing conversations and witnessing wonderful stories of transformation, including my very own. And now I share them with you. Your stories, your narratives, our inspiration. I'm Cory George, and this is One on One. Welcome to this very special Father's Day edition of One on One. I'm your host, Cory George, and joining me today are not just my friends, but I call them father friends. And today we're talking about the challenges and the triumphs of raising black children in today's America. And so joining me today are my dear friends, Mr. Marlon Hall and Mr. Christopher Tate, who was a friend of the show. He was here before. So first of all, I am so happy that you guys are joining me because this is one of the shows that I wanted to have because the conversation is important. Because nowadays, I don't feel that attentive fathers get the recognition and the attention that they actually so deserve. But what I wanted to start off with, I wanted you guys to tell us how many children you have and the age and sex.
Okay. I'm Marlon, and I have four children, four adult children now. Um, my oldest daughter, Kiera, is 25, 26. Marlon is 24. Kayla's 23. And Kyra just turned 20.
Okay.
I am Chris. I have three children. Well, three, I guess you got young people. My oldest son, Kirk, is 35. Crystal's 22, and Christopher is 20.
Well, so myself, I have Tyler and Justin, 15 and 11, and we had a conversation about Justin. He thinks he's 30, but he's just 11. But I wanted to talk to you guys because you guys were the picture of fatherhood that I saw before I even had kids, and it was different for me because in my life I hadn't seen parents who were so involved. Every time I talked to you, there was a story about your children. Mm-hmm. And Chris, you've actually raised your children single-handedly into some awesome human beings. And so what I wanted to talk about, because I know it hasn't been easy, but I know that there are some great rewards. And so the first question I'd like to ask you guys, because you have older children, what do you feel is different when parenting children back then to parenting your young adults in this day and age right now?
You ahead.
I guess when I was raising my children when they were younger, I guess I tried to stick to the core values that I was raised with myself, and that was, yes ma'am, no ma'am, just respect of adults and authority figures. Mm-hmm. I think today we're faced with a whole other set of issues with our children to where they kind of have, I wouldn't say no fear, but the reverence seems not to be there like it was before. I mean, just the little things like respecting your adults, respecting your authority figures. I don't see that a lot now, or it's not as common as it was when we were coming up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that because my kids actually can point out when they see other kids, yeah, and say, why is he or she saying that? Why are they dressing that way? Yeah. Because as you said, the core values should never change. Yeah. Now the times change, yeah, but the core values that work will always work. Yeah. And so asking you the same question, what do you feel is the difference now when you look at the way that you have to parent your children now in this day and age as opposed to back then when there was less influence?
But with me, my mother was my extreme influence with us. She raised 8 kids by herself. And when I divorced in 2000 and began raising my kids alone, I brought them to DC from California. There were so many people that were just challenging. Is it going to work? Chris, mm-hmm, you taking them kids 3,000 miles from their mom to a place they've never been before, to the snow, blah, blah, blah. And my approach back then was mimicking my mother. That's all I could think about. I was the PTA president, my kids from pre-K through 12th grade, every school they went to. And so I had the hands-on effect with them. All of their friends knew Mr. Tate. Even now, every friend they ever had, every teacher knew Mr. Tate. And that worked for me back then. But the challenge now is that back then kids were more protected because we had more hands-on. Now social media, the internet age has really got our kids in a combative state. The young man I ran into not long ago, going back and forth to court, he got arrested for having a gun in his backpack at school.
Wow.
Now, was he going there for trouble? No. Was he gangbanging? No. They immediately thought he was a gangbanger because he wore the saggy pants and he had a gun. I talked to him. He said, Mr. Tate, I don't know what's going to happen when I leave home every day. They don't have protection from my house to school. I have to get on the metro bus, then the train, and I don't wear the right clothes. If I wear, the wrong colors, it can cost you your life just like that. He said, I'm tired. I'm tired of being bullied by people because I don't talk a certain way. I mean, the whole picture is different now. And the parents nowadays, I think, are not coming up to age as far as knowing the needs of their kids. What worked for us back then is not going to work now. Right. We didn't have the challenges they had back then. So,
well, that's true. But and I also think to counter that is to, as you said, there's more challenges, so we have to adapt to the facts. So for me, as I've told you, my kids have tablets, they have cell phones. So there's times I have to be more invasive, whether they feel comfortable with it or not. And there was a story I always tell Tyler. I said, based on social media, you can experience mental hardship and mental illness, and you can be depressed. You can get bullied. I would hate to come home and find you hanging in a closet. And sometimes you have to get very stark with your children and say, this is what I don't want from you. So that means if I have to be a bit more invasive and ask for your password or look to see who you're sending private messages to so you know that I'm watching, I think that I think when anybody knows that somebody's watching, there's a self-censorship that happens.
But even with that, we got to be careful policing our children versus having compassion for them. We don't want our children to feel like, okay, I'm watching you. I'm watching your passwords. Then they feel like they have this camera on them everywhere they go, as opposed to let them know, I have your password, and we share that. But you can look at it without having to tell them all the time, so they don't feel like they're under surveillance. I think kids will feel more trusted if they know that, daddy has or mom has my information, but they're not over my shoulder micromanaging me everywhere I go.
But you know what? But for me, because I know the principles I've instilled in my kids, I actually feel like I'm looking for what someone else is doing to them first. Meaning because, things are so coy and so overt. So for example, if my 11-year-old is engaged in a conversation, his perception may not be as swift as mine, meaning, do you realize what they're asking you? You may not, and you're not at fault. I'm not faulting you, but because you're of that age, you may not have comprehended what's going on. So it's not always a matter it's not always a matter of policing them. It's a matter of saying, are you aware of what's going on? Because coming from a background of being raped as a child, I know that certain things are so overt that you don't see it until it's happening. So there's times I'll tell my kids, do you realize what this question is? Because I've never addressed that with you, and so you don't know that what they're asking you is actually something else. So it's not always a matter of being the police, it's a matter of also helping them to understand this is what this context means too. Because like you, I don't feel like we have to put our kids up against the wall, because it almost feels like it almost feels like you are blaming them for something that hasn't happened yet.
But even with that, there's a thing of just making sure they're okay.
Yeah.
One of my daughters, this is back a few years, she was probably about 18, 19-ish. So, you're not quite grown, but you're grown-ish.
Right.
And Facebook, our kids grew up with Facebook. So I'm her friend on Facebook, and I'm not so much policing it, but if it shows up on my timeline, well, I see it. There was some things on there that I didn't like. I call her, she's back home in Pittsburgh. I live here. Hey, I don't like that. I don't think that was a good look for you. Now, I'm not trying to tell you, I'm not saying it's to her, but I'm not trying to tell her what to do, but I'm trying to, lead you or make you think a different way about what you post on your page. Well, at that particular instance, it didn't go over too well. It's my page, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't threaten to come home and whoop your butt now. So, you'll have to learn for yourself. Well, she unfriended me, and I didn't feel bad about it. I didn't call and fuss about it because you are grownish. But some things you have to learn on your own.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you
and it's very
everything
true.
at this age. When you were younger, yes, but I can't tell you everything now and expect you to listen to everything. My son lives with me, and he's grown. He's way grown now. So I can tell you about my experiences. I can't say, well, you're going to make this mistake or I made this mistake. They're life experiences. Now I can tell you, if you choose not to listen to it or, heed to my example, then that's on you. And then you come back to me and say, well, guess what happened? And I'm like, I'm fighting that I told you so.
Absolutely.
But it's like, hey, I told you what happened to me.
But it's very important you said that you shared your experiences, because I think sometimes as parents, we can sometimes come off as judge and jury without having a blemish on our own record, right?
Yeah.
There's sometimes I'll share some stories that I never thought I would tell my kids, but because I don't want you to fall in the same trap, and I see you're almost heading there, this is what it looks like. This is what it feels like, and this is what the payback feels like.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to feel what I felt, I have to let you fall. Because there's times I've told them, I said, I taught you how to ride a bike, but there's sometimes you're going to have to fall and scrape your knees a little bit. And I don't want to catch every fall, because I don't want to raise children that can't cope in the real world. So there's a fine line between trying to protect them and letting them live to learn how to protect themselves, right? It's like, I don't want, like Tyler had his first fight at school. He won the fight, but I was upset he had a fight because that's not what I wanted for him. But he had his experience. He said he didn't like fighting, but I'm like, wow, my kid had a fight. Never did I think, or did I ever tell him that you're gonna have a fight at school. But I had to let him have the experience, and now he realizes that wasn't the best thing to do. So, go ahead, Marlon.
No, I was just to that, we say things and we share experiences with our kids. I had the experience just this past weekend having conversation with my son, and he said, God, I sound just like you. And I said, well, we say things, that our parents or our grandparents said, and I found myself doing that. But it lets you know that at some point they're listening. My girls say the same thing. And at some point, what we say will rub off on them. Us coming from a pure place, we want to see our kids excel. We want to see our kids go above what we did, and we want to see them avoid some of the pitfalls that we did. So when it comes back to me, some of the things I said to him or some of the things I said to the girls, and they come back to me with the same thing, and they don't even realize it until later. It's like, well, you were listening. It did click.
One thing I had to be careful of, and it's a confession on my end. I found myself living vicariously through my children. A lot of mistakes I made as a kid. I would lay in bed at night. Okay, I can't let this happen to them. I can't let them do that. I'm trying to correct my wrong through them, and didn't realize I was doing it. And I found myself being overly protected. I mean, I'm overly doing everything, trying to put the cart ahead of the horse a lot of times. And my children didn't notice it, but it took an older person, and even my mother even said it. What are you doing? I said, well, Mom, this is how you're supposed to. No, Chris, take your hand off. It's not that serious. But Mom, Chris, it's okay. They didn't ride a bus to school by themselves until mid-junior high school. I knew you're not getting on a city bus with, and they went to school straight up Georgia Avenue from where I live. So one bus, even if I was so nervous about them, something happening that I had to catch myself. And so it got to the point where when they got older, I had to do things on their own. I mean, even now, my daughter I taught her how to drive when she was 16, 17. She got a license at 19 years old. I didn't let her, I would let her drive with me in the car, but she just started driving by herself in September last year, and I bought her a car in November. And it was an act of God every time she got in the car. At 23 years old, I'm sitting here, Lord God,
I was going to say, because mind you, your daughter's in grad school and and just driving. But let me add to that confession, because I can agree to that, because I had talked about the fact that my experience with sexual assault. made me a very, very careful parent. My kids barely went to spend the night at anyone's house. If you went to play at someone else's house, I needed to have the phone number. And either me or your
DNA
other
samples
dad,
and
yeah,
everything.
yeah. Either
Yeah.
either me or your other dad would have had to meet them already, because when I let you go there, you're factually in their care.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have guns in the house. I don't know if they have older siblings who, you know. So I had to take my hand off and realize if I did that, it would trap them into always thinking, A, that I was going to always protect them and I would have grown children who didn't know how to fend for themselves. But secondly, I realized in the beginning I was parenting at a deficit
Yeah.
because my father chose not to be there. He was alive and well, but just chose not to be there. So my sentiment was, I never want my children to feel that abandonment.
Yeah.
So we sometimes overcompensate for things that are already done.
Yeah.
So I had to learn and say, in order to fix this, I just have to be what I wish I had.
And even with the, being overprotective, my kids were in Pittsburgh. I was here. So I did the overcompensation thing. I guess maybe for the first few years, I don't know if they really realized that I didn't live in Pittsburgh anymore because I was home for everything. Games and field trips and thus and so. But I felt like I had to do it because I did not want them to feel that that sting of not having a father there. Not so much in the house, but in the same area. Right. So I don't think they really realized that because I was up and down the road all the time. And as they got older, they would come down here and spend, part of their summer vacation or whatever was going on. But I can feel you on that overcompensation thing because it's like I really want to make sure that they're not lacking for anything or lacking for even the attention, because I don't want them to have to seek that attention from somebody else.
I want to talk to both of you because both of you have older male children. When we are looking at all of these stories about gun violence as it relates to police officers and young black men or even older black men, how has that altered or augmented the conversations you have with your sons and even daughters about dealing with police?
My son hates cops, and it's because of his peers. He'd never had any direct incidents that happened with him, per se. There was one little crazy thing when he was 12 years old. He was skateboarding in an area where they should have been skateboarding, and they actually handcuffed him and took him to the police station. I had to go pick him up. That was ignorant, but that little tiny hour that it took to do that really put a bad taste in his mouth with cops. And as a skateboarder, and my son's a black belt in karate, but he didn't do that to be defensive. He learned, the discipline thing coming up. But as a skateboarder, skating right there in DC off 9th and Rhode Island Avenue, he watches the cops a lot, harassing his friends because a lot of his friends smoke weed over there and they skateboard. They don't rob nobody. They don't do that. They just hang out. And he watched the nonsense of some of the stuff. And there's a lot of conversation that goes on in the house about it. It's hard for us as parents because, again, there's a whole different language among the kids than from us. That's one thing. He's open to talking to me about it, but we have to be sensitive to the fact that, we got to use these a lot, y'all. We got to listen. A lot of what the conversation is going to be coming from them to us. Because what we dealt with with police coming up is different than what it is
Very
now.
different.
Everything is cell phone now. People will stand and watch you get beat down before they help you just to get a good copy on their phone, good footage,
And that's the sad part about it is that because this world has become such an immediate, sensationalized,
real time,
real time thing. And it's like if I'm watching something on YouTube and I'm like 20 people will pull out the cameras, but nobody's helping this defenseless person. But going back to the question about the police, I will say that for me, I've always taught my kids to have a voice because I didn't feel I had one growing up. So I've always taught them, if you have a voice, be expressive, but be respectful. But one of the hardest conversations, which I will also ask you guys this question, is telling my kids, although I've taught you to have a voice, now I have to teach you when to dumb it down. Because I just want you to get home. Because when my kid goes out and ride a bicycle, he, he he still has the propensity of being stopped for whatever reason. And I know that my oldest child feels like he wants to say what he wants to say,
Yeah.
but I have to say at that moment, I just want you to get home.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge, balance telling them when to not or when to have a voice. So so I want you to answer the question too, Marlon.
None of my children are docile, or they have a voice, and growing up in a climate that they've grown up in, and even now as young adults, you never think that you have to have that conversation of, do you know how to talk to police? Or now, do you know how to talk to the person walking down the street, because you don't know
Absolutely.
what they're doing, what they're going through, what they have in their pocket. My son specifically, because he's a little more like me with his mouth, and I'm 40 plus years old, and I think through what I'm going to say, but I have to tell him, you can't pop off on everybody. You can't pop off on these police, because they'll pop back off on you.
Yeah.
So just saying, hey, if you're stopped, this is what you do. This is what you can say, and this is what you're going to have to hold off on, or tone it down a bit. I don't want you to feel like you're not able to speak your mind,
Right.
but there's situations where you just have to learn how to shut up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they will, take you there sometime, but you have to be smart.
Yeah.
Because they will play you into, right into the role that they want you to be in, where they have to use force, or they have to come after you. And I don't want that phone call that, because you chose to speak your mind at that time,
Yeah.
now you're not here, or I have to come get you from the jail.
Yeah, and that's the sad part, because I've told people, get home and then curse at the wall, or or
Let's
yell
go
at the
into action
pillow.
after you get home.
Do an action that helps you relieve that, because we just want you to get home.
Yeah.
We don't want to be that parent that expects their child to come home from basketball practice, or their child to come home from the dollar store and then never come back home. A life wasted, and then we have to go through the legal system just to find out that we don't matter. That's the hardship that I don't want to face. But speaking of hardship, and we talked about this before the show started, what was one of the toughest conversations that you've had to have with your children?
With me, my daughter, and especially her, well, both of them, and not just my daughter, I'm like the soccer mom dad of the neighborhood. So every weekend I have kids stacked all over my house. And it would bother me that a lot of these kids' parents will let them just come. And I didn't get one phone call from a parent. No one's asking about where I live, what's in my house. My daughter had a sleepover the first time she had it for her birthday. Maybe 12 girls came, and they were new to that school. And I'm the PTA president. It's the beginning of the school year, though. And my daughter's birthday in September.
Okay.
And so me and my son had already planned to get a hotel, and her godmother going to stay at the house with the girls. But that's the conversation we had. Parents didn't know that. And when these parents started sending their girls to me, not knowing, I had to talk to my daughter, say, you know what, I hate to tell you this, but we have to start pulling back, because I can't tell them how to raise their children, but I can't have your friends at my house, their mamas and daddies, then calling me to inquire, and you can't go there either. I mean, you can go, but I'm going first. I need to get, I was joking, DNA samples and everything.
Right.
I need to know what's over there. And having to be that one parent, I felt like I was, in the circle of one doing this. Other parents didn't do that. And my kids thought I was being just this really mean person for a minute.
Yeah.
They understood it after a while, but that was hard, because I love them, but I'm sorry, I just have to put my foot down on that one.
Yeah, I think the hardest conversations I've had to have was probably sex.
Oh, yeah.
And to make sure that I had those, because those weren't necessarily the conversations that they had with me. And I think Chris can relate to what I'm about to say, but growing up in church, they didn't necessarily think we were doing what we were doing when we were doing it. So,
And often.
given the fact that I was a young parent, I was 17 years old. So when it happened, it was like, oh, I thought all you did was, go to church and
Right.
well, no, I was doing more than that.
Right.
I didn't want that same experience for my children. More so, I didn't want them to ever say that you didn't have this conversation with me, because they didn't really say. They said use this and don't do that, and that was pretty much it.
It was all heaven and hell.
Heaven or hell.
In between.
So my thing is, you are a sexual being.
Right.
How can I have this conversation to let my children know that you're going to have these feelings, and this is what you do, and although they may not have listened to everything I said, you can't say that you didn't know.
Absolutely.
You can't say that you didn't know. And that was, although I had those conversations with them, and I said, feel comfortable to come to me with any conversation. I was praying like, please don't come to me with that conversation.
Right.
But they did, and when they did, I was able to handle that. Now I may have went and screamed in my pillow a couple times, because I was like, I can't believe, especially the girls.
Yeah.
My son was one thing, and we can talk, and candidly, and we still do.
Yeah.
But the girls, I was like, oh my God.
Now on that their subject right there, real quick, I'll say this. I get sick of parents thinking, and as they post it on Facebook all the time, you can't be your child's best friend. That's a lie.
That's a lie.
That's a lie. To me, if your child, first of all, you make sure you understand, I'm daddy, your son.
Yeah.
You got that down?
Yeah.
Well, the boundaries,
Yeah. And so once we establish that, best friends share secrets.
Yeah.
My kids have told me stuff I wouldn't have never told my
Absolutely.
dad. And then, like he said, you can't sit there and come at them. You have to go back in your room and scream and holler and rip a wall off. But having that outlet, they know they can come talk to you without you popping off.
But it's very important because,
And it doesn't mean you co-sign what they do either.
Absolutely.
You're just an ear.
But they can trust you.
Trust you.
They can trust you with it.
Well, and that's love. I tell people, I tell my sons all the time, I'm going to love you so good that when you leave my house, I don't care who you end up with, they're going to have to meet my level of what I'm doing
Exactly.
in
You
the
raise the
house.
bar.
Absolutely.
You raise
And
the
not
bar.
only that, I would rather you get the information from me than to seek it outside.
Yeah.
So I'm usually the first person to ask. Now you
If they
probably
can't
ask your
talk to you, they
friends
can't
too,
trust you.
but we don't. I don't feel that I have a lot of secrets. I have a 15-year-old. There are some things he hasn't told me yet. I get that because he's going through his own changes. But I can almost feel and guarantee that I'm not far off of what I know. And it's not that I'm prying. It's more so saying, I always tell them, I'm here. My room is right down there. First I'm not going to judge first. I'm going to judge after. But let me hear it first.
After.
Yeah, because I have to tell you, let me just hear it first, and then let me tell you what my take is on it. And I think when you do have that friendship underneath the authority, I feel you're going to get less surprises. But I think for me, the hardest conversation, because I came up in an upbringing where families were shattered a lot, when me and their dad called it quits, I felt like a failure because I blew away the image of what I was hoping for them. But in hindsight, I realized that children are resilient because we had the honesty there, and I told them what it was. It was a softer landing because there wasn't a lie about it. So I want all dads to know that your presence is so needed.
Absolutely.
And especially in today's times, we need you to be there if you aren't there. But there are also some wonderful dads who are doing a bang-up job, and we applaud you and we salute you. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. And if you want to stay up to date on what's coming up next, just go to oneononewithcory.com or search Cory George Media on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. And as always, be great to someone else as you would like them to treat you. Until next time, God bless.
Yeah.